welcome to Out of the Box Radio with me, your host, Christine Blasdale. Out of the Box Radio is a weekly podcast of audible ear candy dedicated to bringing a fresh perspective on this thing that we call life. And each and every week, we're going to be diving into the topics that matter most with lively conversations on issues such as health, wellness, and transformational healing, all with the goal of creating a better world and becoming a happier human being. I will be your tour guide for this epic adventure, and each and every week we're going to be embarking on a journey with the ultimate goal being transformation to our highest potential. And now, let's get out of the box.
And so there have been many ingredients that lead up to this moment. And when I speak about this moment, I speak of this moment from the perspective that it is not complete. So when I say to you teachings from an awakened heart, it doesn't mean that I've arrived somewhere and now that I'm here, there's nothing more to do. This is just another stage. And part of the stage is sharing with you all that I have experienced, all that I have realized, in the hope that it may give you something for you to realize about yourself and about your own awakening heart.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christine Blasdale, and that was my dear friend and today's very special guest, Shavasti. Shavasti is a spiritual teacher and seer with a foundation in ancestral healing and shamanism. He is the author of 6 books, has traveled around the world many times over, giving workshops on every single continent, and he's here today with us to discuss some of life's most important lessons. Welcome to Out of the Box, Shavasti.
Well, hello there, Christine. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me here today, and I look forward to answering your questions and just discussing life and its meaning.
That's our favorite subject, isn't it?
Indeed it is.
For our listeners, I really think it's important that they understand how you got to, this is my whole journey in this program too, to present to the listeners wonderful people who I believe can give them a little bit of insight in life and help them in some way. Mm-hmm. Health, wellness, transformation. But if you don't mind letting our listeners know a little bit about your transformation, how you got to the point where you are today and what you do, what you're mm-hmm. doing all around the world. You're going, traveling and being with people, but let our listeners know a little bit about your journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was in the corporate world up until the age of, I think 32, or 31 even, yes, 1992. I stepped out of the corporate world, and really with burnout. I'd been very successful, but I was deeply unhappy. I had everything that a 30-year-old could possibly want. I had a relationship. I had a big house in the second most expensive street in the town. I had 2 cars. I had a dog. And I had a good job, and I had it all. But I was deeply, deeply, deeply unhappy. And I didn't really know why I was unhappy. So then I started to explore that. And that's when my world changed. And eventually I stopped doing the corporate job, and I went back to my roots as a child, because as a child I was sensitive, I was psychic, I was the kid that always said the obvious things that used to annoy the adults around me.
Truth?
Yes, it's called truth.
It's called truth.
Yeah, you know, Mummy, why is that happening? Daddy, why is that happening? Etc., which would get them really annoyed. So I started off life doing, again, after leaving the corporate world, started off life again doing tarot readings on the dining room table in my living room. And then they started to change. The nature of the readings started to change because I got fed up with being asked the same questions. When am I going to meet the man of my dreams? Mm-hmm.
Right.
When am I going to get that big high-paying job? Etc. So it all became the same. And I noticed that with my cards, I started to lay out relationships. Well, this card is your father. This is your mother. Oh, see, I see that you've got 2 siblings. And looking at how there was an influence from the events of previous generations coming into our life today. And it was from there I heard about this work called Family Constellations, which I then got involved in. So I've gone from being a psychic reader in my living room to becoming a recognized expert in the field of family constellation work, which is ancestral healing work, to practicing and really going in depth into shamanism, to being the author that I am today. So that was not an easy journey to take, because I went from high salary corporate to not knowing how am I going to pay my rent, where's my next meal coming from, but I certainly could not go backwards.
Right. You mentioned family constellation?
Yes, that's right.
What is that? What is that?
Family constellations is a way of looking at the subconscious loyalties that we have to our family members. And a family member is not just mum, dad and siblings. That's grandparents, that can be uncles and aunts, great-grandparents, etc., etc. And so each of us is born into a story that's already being told. So our family already has a script, and that script could be, we're the ones that work hard and get no reward. We're the ones that suffer. We're the ones who are pure. We're the ones who are better than, or we're the stupid ones. So normally each family has a story that they hold on to and they pass on to their kids and grandkids. And so we look at the loyalties not only to the stories that we've been born into, to these belief systems, but also to the suffering of the previous generations. And so this can be done in a group. It can also be worked with on one-on-one. So that was really my area of work for 16 to 18 years.
Wow.
I started in 1997. So that was when I was living in the Netherlands. And so I first came across the work in the Netherlands and also in Germany. So that transformed how I started to work with people. And then I underwent training, and then I became a practitioner. And so that's still a part of my life today.
When you talk about family constellations, when a child is born into a family, like you said, there is a story, there is a play that's already kind of going on, and they're on stage, playing a part, I believe, right? Does that also take into account previous lifetimes that we've had and those stories, or is it the same family that we keep coming back into, or what? I mean, what has been your experience with that?
Really, it's looking at transgenerational patterns. It doesn't really. There are some people that use the method, if you like to call it a method, to look at past lives. I'm personally of the point of view it's irrelevant whether it's coming from a past life or whether it's ancestral. If it's a pattern that we have and it becomes resolved, then it doesn't really matter where it comes from. That's really the mind that wants to label everything and wants to make everything into a nice, neat formula. I think that as human beings, it behooves us to be very watchful and mindful of what new stories are we creating. Because for me, the ultimate goal is to have no story.
Explain that.
Stories lead to identity, and identity leads to limitations. So the story is, my great-grandmother survived the Irish potato famine and came to the United States, and she was poor and worked hard, and she had a violent husband, and my grandmother, who was her daughter, similarly had a violent husband. And so this becomes yet another story that we can live out. And that story can be lived out in terms of men aren't to be trusted. Or, again, being the fifth woman in a row of generations, or the fourth woman who is marrying the same kind of husband all over. So we can be very loyal to the suffering of the previous generations. So these stories then become part of our identity. And that our identity is, I'm Irish and men aren't to be trusted. And then that becomes part of our script. So eventually the goal is to become scriptless. So lacking the identity, lacking the loyalty to father's suffering or father's disappointment in life or mother's suffering, mother's illnesses, mother's disappointment in life. When we surrender that, we also surrender the stories, and we surrender the identity. And it's identifying with those stories and identifying with the suffering that create the repetition of such circumstances in our life as we see it.
One of the most important things that I witnessed, that I've seen with myself, with friends and with family, are the stories that we tell ourselves about us. You know, when I was a child, this happened to me. And those stories, it's like a play or a movie that keeps, especially if it's something that's traumatic.
Absolutely.
I mean, it doesn't have to be physical abuse or sexual abuse. It can just even be a traumatic accident that you had as a child. But let's say if you did have a traumatic childhood with a parent that was crazy or hurtful, that was your childhood. So that's when your brain is developing. That is how you're seeing relationships.
These are formative years.
Right.
And so what can come out of that is a core belief, and I call it an I am statement. And that I am statement could be something like, I am unwanted. And there might be plenty of evidence for that. But it then becomes like a beacon. You know, these sound beacons like beep, beep, beep. So we're constantly emanating this vibration of I am not wanted. And so that it continues to manifest throughout our lives.
It's the same as seeing ourselves as that child who's been hurt repeatedly. You're not identifying with yourself as, okay, I am right now, I'm safe. I'm safe and sound. I'm attempting in life these certain things. But when we tell ourselves those stories, that's who I am, how do we, well, I know people talk to you and book sessions with you, but how do you begin to separate yourself from that child? How do you get away from those stories of who you are?
Well, there's the key. We don't separate ourselves from the child. We have to merge with that child. The real reason why these stories have such a hold on us is because we've often been in absolute avoidance of feeling the underlying wound. And it's really about wanting to know the absolute truth. So, for example, perhaps your hidden I am statement is, I am unlovable. And so in order to fully heal, we have to be willing to see and accept and feel the absolute truth, and take the risk that maybe we are unlovable, to really know that. And so because we want to avoid the ugly truth, what we've determined as being the ugly truth, that's why we create this separation. So we have this wounded child that is controlling us. You see, most people invest most of their energy, I say most people, I include myself, and no doubt this includes you.
Sure.
We invest most energy in either not wanting to know something or not wanting to feel something. So most of our energy is invested in not wanting to know something or not wanting to feel something. And so when we get to the point of where we are willing, absolutely willing to know the absolute truth, to risk knowing something that is potentially devastating to us, or could be potentially devastating to us, this is the first point where liberation begins to rise on the horizon. And full liberation is meeting something exactly as it is. I'll give an example. I had a client who was over generous, kept on giving stuff and buying stuff, and considerable sums of money and expensive things because she had money, to people that she didn't even like. And we uncovered, well, she felt unlovable, and so she was trying to buy
love, right?
Trying to buy love. And I said to her, what if you allow yourself to be unlovable? Just for a moment, just for 3 breaths. Not longer than that. Just allow it to be absolutely true that you are unlovable. At first she looked kind of shocked and outraged perhaps. She just had a look on her face, and I thought, well, we've touched something here. I said, just allow it, take the risk. And when she did, and I could tell that she had, a broad smile came across her face, and she began to laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. And I allowed her to laugh for a couple of minutes. So the laughter was very, very palpable, and it was genuine. And then she suddenly said, I feel free. If I am truly unlovable, that I don't have to waste my time trying to buy friendships that are not real. And then as soon as she said that, she then laughed at the fact that how ridiculous, this belief that she's unlovable.
Right. Right.
So first came freedom, then came the truth.
Right. I love, you have a wonderful way of looking at secrets. I love your whole perspective on secrets. Secrets that people keep within families. Secrets.
Very damaging. Family
Secrets that people keep from themselves. Talk about that. Talk about those secrets that we keep.
How much time have you got?
Well, I know. We'll try and touch on the subject.
Right. Family secrets have been a big thing, and family secrets have really come about or have been amplified through the role that religion has played in our society. What religion has done has created spirituality into a moral code rather than encouraging our personal mystical relationship with the divine. Okay, so religion has created a moral code, and it is only those adherents to the moral code that are then considered good enough to be loved by God, for example. So that has existed for a couple of thousand years within the Abrahamic religions, the Judeo-Christian tradition. What moral codes do is that they deny human nature. They deny human nature. So you have all these rules that say you can't eat fish on Fridays, or there's no sex before marriage, or whatever the rule might be. But it's simply, or that you cannot have love between two people of the same sex. Two women can't have a relationship and two men can't have a relationship. So moral codes deny human nature. That's what they seek to do. And they also seek to control the population and their relationship with the divine. So this led to a lot of secret holding. So therefore, there are a lot of secret children in the world. Already studies have been done to show that there's quite a surprising high percentage of children in this world who are not from the father that they think. So the secret is being held. Each of us, in each family, we can look at these stories that we hear about an aunt or an uncle whose existence more or less has never been spoken of, or they're kept as a secret, or children being asked to keep secrets. It takes a lot of energy to hold a secret. For example, mothers going to their children and even in small ways saying, but don't tell your father. Or father saying, but yes, I bought these shoes for you, but don't tell your mother. Because mother's in charge of the household budget, etc. So when parents do that, it creates a burden for the child. And to be told secrets of extramarital affairs, I've worked with clients who were, as children, expected to keep the fact that mother or father were having affairs secret. Talk about betrayal. You can imagine how that works out. But with my work, what I've discovered and what several others through family constellation work and ancestral healing work have discovered is that these secrets have an effect 1 and 2 and 3 generations later as well. So, for example, let's say your grandmother had had an affair and gave birth to a child, and so the official story is she had a a maiden aunt in Michigan somewhere who was sick, so she went off to stay with that maiden aunt for 6 months to look after her, when in fact what she was going to do was to go and give birth to a child.
Right.
And so that child then is given up for adoption, or is even raised with that maiden aunt, for example. On a subconscious level, those in the next generation know that they have a missing uncle or missing aunt, and can spend years searching for that which is missing and never know what that is.
Searching for that missing part,
Thing,
aspect of their life, but not be able to pinpoint what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something that's missing. Something is not right.
So whenever clients come to me, and that's my first line of question when they say, I'm here because there's something missing in my life, first thing I do is investigate the family. Sometimes it's an internal thing, has got nothing to do with a missing person, but it's normally within 5 minutes I know which direction it's going to be in. And it can be both, of course. We can also have that feeling of something missing if we, for example, weren't breastfed when we were babes.
Right.
Or if we were born in the 1950s or 1960s, if our mothers were following the instructions then of the medical profession to only feed a child once every 4 hours and leave them in a cot in the garden or something and ignore their screams. Many of us were raised in that way, and that can also be the feeling of something missing or not quite enough. And so the family secrets, they have an energy. It costs energy to hold a secret. And so if you're born into a family that has secrets, they're always felt. I am, to this day, still amazed when people say to me things like, oh, but I've never said that in front of the children. For example, when they're referring to having gone through a divorce or going through a divorce and not speaking with disrespect about the partner or about the other person. Children are psychic sponges. They know and feel everything. And this can also be a cause of mental illness. And I mean that quite seriously. So the child feels all the secrets.
But they don't know where it's coming from.
They don't know where it's coming from. And on top of that, when they vocalize that something is not quite right, and they're convinced by the adults around them that they're wrong, when they absolutely know that they're right, this can lead to mental illness.
Yes. Yeah.
Because in fact, you're the crazy one. You're imagining all these things, but in fact, they're not imagined, they are in fact true. So secrets can lead to insanity.
Because of that, it carries an energy, and it requires a great deal of energy to keep the secret.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also too, children know the absolute truth.
Yes.
And so when that truth is denied, which it is all the time. I'll give you an example. We're told, thou shalt not lie, which is a very good commandment from the Ten Commandments. There's nothing wrong with the Ten Commandments at all. But we're told, thou shalt not lie. And we are punished severely as children often for telling lies. And yet we hear the adults around us lying all the time. Mm-hmm. So we can walk into the living room and Mum and Dad can be sitting there talking about an upcoming visit of Aunt Jane and how they're not looking forward to it because they don't really like Aunt Jane at all. In fact, they can't stand Aunt Jane, and thank God she only ever comes once or twice a year. So that's what we hear. Then Aunt Jane arrives. Oh, how wonderful to see you, darling. It's been so long. And as the child, you're sitting there, taking this all in, realizing that the adults around us are crazy. They're talking about stuff as if it's really important.
They're liars.
And they lie. All the time. And yet we're told, thou shalt not lie, and are severely punished for lying.
Wow.
So children can be sent to their room, they can be spanked, they can be beaten, they can be punished, shamed, and humiliated for lying. So a lot of shaming goes on in our childhood. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine that you're a young child, you know what the truth is, because the truth is clearly visible.
Yes. And
yet it's denied right in front of you. So what choice do you have? The only choice you have is to make yourself wrong. There's something wrong with me. And that's what we do. And that happens to all of us. There's something wrong with me. And if there's something wrong with me, that means that I'm bad. And so the shaming continues from generation to generation to generation to generation.
Wow. It's so true about when, as children, we do witness all the time adults lying.
And our only choice is to make ourselves wrong. And then wrong turns into bad.
And then later in life, if there's something wrong with you, then you have justification why no one should love you.
Absolutely.
I don't deserve to have a happy relationship. I don't deserve to have the job of my dreams. I don't deserve blank, blank, blank.
So then imagine that your father took the belt strap to you, or your mother took the back of the hairbrush to you each time. So then you've got that deep shaming, and love is not to be trusted because my parents love me, but it's not to be trusted. So violence destroys love.
Violence does destroy love.
So then you're left with, I'm unlovable and I am damaged goods.
Right.
So where does that leave us?
Nowhere, not a nice place.
Pretty worthless.
Yeah.
And so each of us has historically carried or still carries that to a certain degree. In fact, all of humanity does. And so there is this irony that we have. Every religious and spiritual tradition on the planet talks about the word truth. I talk about the word truth. The irony of that is that the vast majority of us are not looking for the truth. We're looking for a way to improve our life circumstances, because there are many aspects of the truth that are frightening.
Right. One of the beautiful things about the work that you do is finding solutions, helping people get to the, and this is what I love about you, is that you just get to the very, very core of truth and love. And you have a very, very special tool that people can use to help uncover some of those wounds, discover something inside of them that maybe they didn't even know existed. And it's called Teachings from an Awakened Heart.
Yes, that's right. That's my...
Talk about...
It's a 5-hour digital download, which is broken down into, I think it's 11 tracks, actually. So it's broken down into tracks. I'm simply really talking about everything that I've learned and posing questions. To me, in order for us to find the answers, we must be exposed to someone who can ask the right questions. And one of my teachers, just one simple question completely bring up a surprising amount of either emotional content or whoa. Just whoa, I've got no idea. Yes, just with one question. I think a lot of people understand what that word means. Whoa, I wouldn't know how to spell that. For instance, one of the questions that shifted things for me was the day I was driving in my car, and I suddenly asked myself, what if the question is not who am I, but what am I? And I got serious goosebumps that lasted for 2 minutes.
Wow.
With that. I was thinking about pulling off the freeway, because I was like, whoa, that's a really very different question there. So Teachings from an Awakened Heart is this 5-hour download that is really a journey of what I have discovered, what I discovered to be the truth, and really asking you questions. So it's You've listened to it,
Oh,
so
it's fantastic.
so you listen to 10 minutes and you sit and contemplate on it, and things happen.
Yes, it's very concentrated.
Yes.
That's what I found, is that I can only, it's the same thing when I have, there's very, very special, what I call sacred texts, sacred books. And I'm not talking, it's not necessarily a book that's thousands of years old. It could have just been printed last year. But a sacred text to me is something that when I read it or start to devour the content, it's so concentrated, condensed, that I can only do small. It's like having a rich chocolate bar, you know? I can only have a couple bites. I'm not going to eat the whole chocolate bar.
Right.
I'd get a tummy ache probably, but it's so rich. That's what I'm saying. It's so rich. It's so layered, multi-layered. That's what I found with the digital download that you have, because you present things, and you have it in such an interesting format, because it's a journey. And what you do is you help break down these illusions that we have about who we are.
And it looks at our place in the world. There's a talk a lot about family and
relationships, which is, that is, to give our listeners a little bit of an idea, we're going to just play a tiny portion of this. This is from Shavasti's Teachings from an Awakened Heart. This is the digital download. I want you just to hear a little bit from this, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more. But let's listen now to Shavasti from Teachings from an Awakened Heart.
In seeking personal healing, the emergence of the true self, then it behooves us to examine the nature of our relationships and where we might possibly be entangled. For the entanglements themselves hold us back from the experiences that we are seeking, and for the self-awareness that we are seeking. For self-awareness is also far more valuable than a single spiritual experience that may be indeed very intense. However, if that leads us to continually seek to reproduce that in itself can also become a new prison. So let us look at those we have loved. Perhaps you're divorced, or perhaps you have separated from your life partner, your lover. Perhaps this person is also the parent of one or more of your children. Previously, I've said that emotions have a function. And so hatred has a function. So many of my clients have come to me and have said, I hate my ex-husband. I hate my ex-wife. However, there was a time when you were deeply in love with this individual. And so one of the reasons why we hold on to anger, hatred, and blame is because we have fooled ourselves into believing that the anger and the hatred is easier than feeling the pain of betrayal or disappointment or of the paradise that's been lost. For when two people meet and fall in love, a paradise is created, and it's very beautiful. And that paradise can be tainted by many events. It can be tainted by a miscarriage or the loss of a child. It can be tainted by financial difficulties. It can be tainted by political events such as wars, recessions, or other difficulties. But for the most part, relationships are tainted by our inability to face what is absolutely true. Quite often we get in a relationship with the potential of the person who is standing there, and not with who is actually standing there, not with actually what is on offer, but rather the potential of what is on offer. And so great expectation can be created in what the other should be rather than what the other is. And so an awful lot of disappointment can come about, and consequently, when the relationship ends, great anger, blame, and hatred can be born. And so when we tell the absolute truth, the truth is love still exists. And what I propose to you is, if you have ever loved anyone, that love does not go away. It never goes away. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't vanish somewhere in the universe. But it simply becomes buried behind layers that we've built up that seek to defend the hurt of loss. And very often, when it comes to relationships, the hurt of loss is simply a repetition of much of what we experienced as younger children. And so the loss of a spouse, the loss of a partner, the loss of a lover can be a replayed out drama of that which we experience at an age that we are currently too young to remember. For we come into this world open, innocent, undefended, exuberant, and light-filled. And soon that is unrecognized, and we fall into the great disappointment of that. And so that wound of not being seen for who we are, and the wound of separation, is re-triggered in the disappointments of our relationships. And so for many of us, it would seem easier to hold on to the resentment, the blame, the hatred, the anger towards a former partner than to face the much deeper wound of not being seen for who we are.
That was Shavasti, and that was just a small portion from the digital download that you have available. That is so key.
Mm-hmm.
That is so key, because we replay in our current relationships. We replay those stories from our childhood. And as you say, and what the great truth is that we just want to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
As we come into this world, we're such big, massive souls shoved into these little tiny little bodies.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to be seen. We want to be recognized for the great soul that we are. And then through how our parents treat us, mold us, shape us, society, school, religion, work, this matrix that's around us, how it shapes us. Then in our relationships, we carry that exact, I don't want to say, it's not even necessarily repeating the story. It's believing the story.
Mm-hmm. It's believing and repeating the story. And it's often not being aware that that's what we're doing. We're reliving out mum and dad's relationship. We're reliving out our own wounding with mum and dad and with siblings. Relationships are really, and it's just the most important topic. It's one of the most important topics. We learn, we grow and develop as human beings through relationships. There are very few of us who are destined to become like an Indian sadhu and sit in a cave somewhere contemplating ourselves and God
Forever
becoming enlightened that way. There are some people that is a definite path, but in my own experience, there's quite a few people who live in ashrams and similar places like that who are there to escape from outside life because it's too difficult and too challenging for them. I'm certainly not saying that that applies to everybody who spends time in an ashram, and I have done that myself, but they do have an element, an ashram, a monastery, a cave does have an element of being safe. And so how are we learning about who we are? And we're learning about who we are through the reflection of the relationships that we have. Because if we say all of our relationships are terrible, what is the common denominator? What is the one thing that all our relationships have in common? And normally when that question is asked, we search for the commonality of the badness of all the other people. No, the thing that they all have in common is us. I'm the person who's in relationship to these 10 people that I have issues with.
Right.
So what do they all have in common? Me. So that's the first point there, to look at that. And so often women come to me and they say things like, I keep on dating the same guy, but in a different body. It's the same guy that turns up. Well, what do they have in common? Well, they always do this. So, but what they have in common is you. They've all dated you. So what is it about you that has attracted this? Because subconsciously we know, and I know this for myself to be true, and I would be amazed if this is not true for you, dear Christine, but how many times have we got into a relationship, an intimate relationship, or even just a friendship, and we knew on day one there was going to be a problem?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You've done that?
Yeah.
I've done that.
Yeah.
I think just about everybody listening has done that. So this is when I come back to truth about the amount of energy that we put into not wanting to know something and not wanting to feel something. That's where we put most of our energy. And for anyone who is looking at a long-term chronic illness, to hear that, so the question would be, what would your life look like if all of the energy that you invest in not wanting to know something and not wanting to feel something was suddenly accessible to you, and you could use that for your creativity, or your body could use that to heal itself? How different would life look like?
Right.
And so our relationships are paramount in terms of having the foundation to create healthy relationships based upon the truth of who we are, rather than an image of who we were told we are, or that we told ourselves that we are.
Right.
And so it behooves us to really go to the core of the wound. And the wound could be, I didn't get enough. Perhaps even the words could be, Father, I didn't get enough, or Mother, I didn't get enough, or perhaps it's both parents. When we avoid that place, when we're in avoidance of feeling, I did not get enough, of really meeting that for what it is, and meeting what that means, or what we've told ourselves that means. Well, if I didn't get enough, that means that somehow I'm unlovable. When we finally have the courage to meet that, to really, really meet what that is, then we will no longer expect another to fill the space of what we didn't get from mum and dad.
Bingo.
Most relationships are based on trying to get the other person to give you what you didn't get from mum and dad. And that's why divorce rates are very high.
Which is why it breaks. It's also the idea of finding happiness or being this satisfaction from something outside of yourself. I will be happy once I meet the perfect person. I'll be happy once I have the job of, when I'm making this much money, that's when I'm going to be happy. I will feel content, that's especially with women. For so many years there was this pressure about you have to get married by this, certain age, you have to have children by the certain, again, that's the stories, but there's also this need that you're not lovable, you're not perfect, just exactly how you are.
The quality of our life is really determined by who we love and how we love them.
Boom.
By who we love and how we love them. And how we love them. And who we love and how we allow ourselves to be loved too.
Yes. Yes.
Because many of us are good at giving,
yes,
and are not very good at receiving.
Yes.
And there really has to be an equal flow. There's one thing that I have learned over the years of working with people, and I have worked with people from all backgrounds, meaning I've worked with people with very little income that I've worked out an exchange with them. I tend not to do that anymore because my life doesn't have space for that. or to do that much. And I've also worked with people of great means who pay for me to fly halfway across the world and work with them. And I've sat on a private jet and done that as well. And no matter what people have, no matter whether they live in a palace or a mansion and drive in a big expensive Mercedes-Benz or a Rolls-Royce, or live in some poor neighborhood somewhere, live in a hut somewhere, none of that makes any difference. What truly makes people either happy or unhappy is how free they feel to love others and to receive love. There are some deeply unhappy poor people and some deeply unhappy rich people. And what I've noticed that where happiness comes in, and when people become content with all that they have, is determined by who they love and how they love them. That's the determining factor. And so we can join all of these manifesting programs to manifest abundance and wealth and all that. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. But if your relationships, I use an American expression, if your relationships suck, that it doesn't matter how much money you've got,
right,
it's never going to fill that space.
Right.
Because living life with a heart that is not open to receive and a heart that can either only give or doesn't give either is a very lonely existence. So our life is built upon relationships, and this is how we learn how to love, through relationships and through self-examination.
It's how we learn to love ourselves as well, because
Absolutely.
when you're in relationship is when it's a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mirror, it's a reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can go, but like you said, if you live in an ashram or on a mountaintop somewhere, you can do whatever, and there's no one there, not to check you. I don't want to say that in relationships you're checked, but it's a reflection.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we don't like that reflection,
Mm-hmm.
because I find that so much of it, and this is why I love the work that you do, and I think that this digital download will help a lot of people. Most of us, and I'll include myself, because I'm including everybody on the planet. Most of us, the one thing that we need to do to have bliss in our lives is to love ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say 99.99% of the population do not love themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That is why the gift that you do through your work, through your coaching, through your teachings is so valuable to people, because after listening to this 5-hour digital download, and again, I had to do it in pieces, but after listening to that particular download, it has helped me to open up to a point to absolutely love myself.
Mm-hmm.
And once you do love yourself, that's when all of this stuff comes in. It's crazy.
Then the world is your oyster.
It's crazy, Shavasti. That's the key. That's the thing is that I learned.
Because otherwise we're emanating, not for me, not for me, not for me. I'm not worthy, not for me. Keep it away.
Well, because then we're reacting in the world.
Yes.
We're reacting to, my day would have been fine, but this person pissed me off, and I was doing good, but then they or this happened. Mm-hmm. But when you really truly love yourself, first of all, when you really, really, truly love who you are, you only attract those people who will add to that energy.
It was the same journey that I had to undertake with going out to the world as a spiritual teacher. It was, well, who am I? Who am I to do this?
Who are you to say that? You're right.
and what does that mean? Am I speaking for God?
Right.
Who the hell am I to be doing that? So that in itself was a journey. Each book has been a journey of looking at my relationship with myself. I remember the first 2 books that I wrote, I was heavily concerned and very concerned and too concerned about what people would think of the book, and I would edit some things out because I thought it was too edgy. And now I don't give a damn. Truth is truth is truth is truth is truth. Yeah. And that is what liberates us. So when I refer again to teachings from an awakened heart, that only took me a weekend to record those 5 hours, and with not an awful lot of editing, because truth is very easy. When we know it, it's very clear, it flows. And what I wanted to give people was a way of looking at their place in the world in a very different way. Understanding that each of us is born into a story that is already being told. We're born into mum and dad's story. So whatever that story is, a mum could be leading the life of a disappointed woman, or dad could be leading a life of feeling imprisoned by the responsibilities of mortgage and career and home, etc. And then there's the family history that is part of the story. We're the brave ones, we're the ones that suffered, we're the refugees, we're the whatever the story is. And then to look at relationships in terms of what's really important. Most people, when they look at relationship problems, they're often talking about personality issues or some behavioral issues. The way that I approach relationships is to look at, well, what is the hidden truth there? What's really, really going on? There are many, many different examples of different relationship issues. So I really wanted to give people different aha moments of, I'd never considered this. So I'm not actually telling anybody what to do or what to think. I'm simply asking the questions and giving some examples. So what does that mean to you? Now, you've listened to it, so there must have been some questions that got your attention or even rocked your world.
I think what really comes through is, and again, it's done in layers. The 5 hours are done in layers, so it's sort of, it takes you through like baby steps to get to that final. There's little aha moments that lead up to this big, huge aha moment. And it all breaks down to the truth, which is love, and the ability to, number one, realize that we are love. And once we realize who we are, what we are, how it frees us. The thing that I would say from this digital download that I got more than anything is the ability to become free. Again, you can go to shavasti.com/Christine and get teachings from an awakened heart, the digital download. Shavasti, before we wrap this up, is there anything that you're feeling that you would like to say directly to the listeners? You have the microphone. You're welcome to say anything that you'd like.
I would say, be willing always to surrender everything that you believe. Be willing to develop a healthy relationship to not knowing. Most of us get very frightened when we don't know something. If we think that we know something, then we feel safer. And so if you could be willing to not know, and be willing, even if it's just for 2 or 3 breaths, to give up all of your beliefs, everything that you believe, the more that we can do that, the freer that we become. Because a lot of the shoulds and the must-dos and the striving to be good will also drop. When I talk to people about giving up the striving to be good, they become fearful. Well, what do you want me to do? To be bad?
No.
No. What happens is we can start to breathe. And when we stop grasping at things and objects and ways of behaving and doing that we believe make us good, it actually does one thing. And it's ironic. It frees the heart to be itself, which is naturally loving and good. So what I've discovered, when you give up the search for that which it is that you're looking for, you will realize that it was never lost, that it was here all the time. And that's my invitation. That's my invitation, and that's what I leave you with today.
That's beautiful. Shavasti, thank you so very much for being on this program, and I'm so glad that the listeners are going to get to know you as I've known you, and I get to share you with the world. I like that.
Thank you. I look forward to it, Christine.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening. And again, if you want to get this very, very powerful teachings, it's Teachings from an Awakened Heart. It's a digital download, and you can go to shavasti.com/Christine. I'm Christine Blosdale. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Tune in next week as well. And remember to always think outside the box.